Well, the word vibration was really never part of my vocabulary. I remember back in, like, maybe it was high school or middle school using the word in science class, but outside of that, it wasn't even really part of my vocabulary until much later in life.
I know. And I skipped chemistry. I did physics. I don't remember the word vibration from physics, but I remember learning all about vibrations as a musician. So when I started my formal music training, they talked a lot about the size of the vibration, the acoustic wave within my instrument, or referring to any instrument, like, piano strings, there's two strings for every note, and so they have to be an exact vibrational match. If
Awesome.
people are singing, if you want to match pitch, anything you're doing, you want to match pitch, because if there's any discord at all, any difference at all between those two vibrations, if they were off even just a little bit, they would create a bunch of overtones, and that's how you could tell whether something was in tune or not. It kind of went and it just exactly lined up. So that it was a very physical, musical sound thing for me for decades,
Oh, that's
until I
all.
started with the whole Abraham Hicks thing. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was thinking about, the word and how the only thing I could relate it to was the drum beat.
Oh
There's the
yeah.
vibration to the drum beat. So that's a
Yeah.
great explanation around the word vibration.
Right?
No, I don't think it was till maybe I was in my 30s when I started learning about energy and healing that the word came back up for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then at that point it was like, oh, okay, so there's more to all of this in the world than I.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of wish that I had learned all that. Of course, it all is all perfect just the way it is, but it's kind of flabbergasting to me that I was 55 before I started learning anything about what I eat, sleep, and breathe now. For 10 years, I've been it's like a big, huge line, drawn in my life, like a before and after picture that says, okay, knows nothing, cares nothing about, vibration or alignment, or even happiness for that matter.
Right.
And then after, where it's all I thought about. I studied it, 8, 10 hours a day. I studied it whenever I wasn't working, or sleeping. I studied it and studied it and studied it, incorporated it, and now it's just second nature. But it's still only been 10 years. Still, that's amazing to
Oh,
me. Not
wow.
even 10 years, just coming
Yeah.
up on 10 years.
Isn't that
Yeah.
amazing? Like, mine
Yeah.
was more of a slow growth kind of a thing. Like, I got introduced to it, the idea of the vibration in the body, but it didn't like sink in. It was just
Mm,
more like information. It
mm-hmm.
I wasn't really experiencing anything different. I didn't really get any deeper into it at all until probably
Right.
10 years later. And I'm thinking it was probably my late 40s before it all started to
Oh, yeah.
sink in. And then I was somewhere like early 50s when it was like it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, oh,
Aha.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
So if I want to, draw better things to me, I need to change my vibration.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it was a slow evolving kind of a thing for me.
Right.
It's
Right.
but then at that last, little bit when it did kind of hit me about vibration, like everything is energy, everything is energy, everything has a vibration, everything has a vibration. It's like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that's crazy. Okay. So
Right.
so then what do you do?
Yeah.
Once you understand that, then what? What
Yeah.
changed?
And for me, it kind of it's very similar background like what you're describing, except for me it was discovering I was the kinesthetic happened for me in my 40s. And that was a big revelation to me. I just remember that was like, how can that be? I had gone through, I was an ed major. I switched to become an ed major in college, and they taught us all about um, visual processors and auditory processors and kinesthetic processors. They only had three back then. I think they have like five or six now. But the The kinesthetic processors were the kids who didn't do well in school, who couldn't sit down or shut up. They were troublemakers. They couldn't concentrate, and they were always bouncing off the walls. And that was a kinesthetic processor, and you had to somehow accommodate them. But they were kind of like the troubled children, the black sheep of the classroom, the way I was taught. And I'm sure that's probably not the way everybody was taught, but that's the way I was taught. And and of course, I was at a conservatory. I was at the Peabody Conservatory learning this stuff, and so they, of course, would have been highly, highly biased towards auditory processors since it was a school full of musicians. But what I learned was that the visual processors did the best in school, and the auditory processors did really well, and you had to make sure you included them, and they were kind of like the I don't know, the golden child that wasn't, that needed extra help but deserved it somehow. And then these kinesthetic processor kids were just, blech. so so 25 years later, when I discover through one of those, personality profile tests or something, and went to meet with the guy who administered it, and he said, okay, so you're a kinesthetic processor, you're a people person, and I don't even remember what else he said. I was like, hold, ho, ho, whoa, 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 whoa. What? I don't remember what else he told me that day about. It was supposed to be for it doesn't matter. But anyway, so we talked about the fact that I said, I'm not people oriented. I'm very numbers oriented, very logical, very linear. I don't think I use those exact words, but something like that. I'm not a people person. I don't like people. He says, well, not according to your test, not according to your results. I was like, okay, let's go back to this kinesthetic thing. What? I did well in school. I could learn, it was easy for me to take tests, and I always sat down and shut up. Well, for the most part, I sat down, I behaved myself. I think talk a lot, but I'm telling him all the reasons why I'm a visual processor. And he's like, it doesn't matter. None of that matters. Kinesthetic, there's nothing wrong with being a kinesthetic. I was like, yes, there is. We did this whole thing. I mean, you talk about resistance. This is all before Abraham Hicks. And so I had started like coming to grips with the fact that I was kinesthetic and kind of sitting with it sometimes and just feeling into it. And starting to realize, I would remember like taking a class, like a lecture, in class, I would take notes. And then right before the test, I would go back, I would reread my notes, I would rewrite my notes. There's the kinesthetic.
Yeah.
And as I'm rewriting it, I can remember not just what she said, but what her facial expression was, what her body posture was as she wrote it on the board. It sounds visual, but I could tell, I started to discern that that was actually a kinesthetic process for me, that rewriting the notes. And I just took the test. I couldn't remember it 3 days later, but in that, I was good at taking tests because it's always got good grades, and it was assumed I was going to go to college. Well, I hated the idea of going to college. Like all of this stuff comes out of, what's our word again?
Vibration.
Oh yeah, vibration. Now vibration, like as a kinesthetic processor, I actually feel the vibrations now.
That's
So it
awesome.
went from an unknown concept to a musical concept to an intellectual, spiritual concept to a very physical concept over the course of 60 whatever years. 65 years. So yeah.
That's interesting. That's a great process there.
Yeah.
You
Sounds
coming
like yours was
more
too.
aware. Yeah, it was way different than that though. I mean, I think when I think about it, um, I've always been able to like pick up on the vibrations of others and just never, like, I didn't even have a vocabulary. I wouldn't have used the word vibration for that in my 20s. I would have
Did you
never.
call yourself an empath? I'm just curious.
I never did call myself an empath,
Mm.
although I think that that's probably true of me, but I never had that vocabulary when I was younger. There was none of that
Yeah, I
when
didn't
I was
either.
younger. And
Mm.
truthfully, even what I would call now my psychic friend network, back then, I called them my prayer group because you just nobody talked about it. Like you got to keep that on the down low.
Right. They ship
And
you off to California if you talked like that.
or Boulder, Colorado. I mean, they had some wishy-washy going on out there too. But now, because because it is more talked about, and I have a wider vocabulary around the word. The vibration is like, well, that's what I was always picking up on. I remember walking up to a friend and touching him in the shoulder and saying, hey, what's going on there? Like, I couldn't like physically see anything wrong, and I hadn't seen him in weeks, but I could tell. I just knew there was something there, and I pointed right to it. And he was like, yeah, I've got a little problem. you know and but that's the reading of the energy to me is like you're reading the vibrations, and you're reading
Right.
what's going on there. And you know what, I even had to look up at one point. I remember looking it up. What's the difference between vibration and frequency?
Mm.
Because I mean, high school was a long time ago. Even if it was high school, it might have been middle school or something that you even learned any of that, and I couldn't remember. So I looked it up after I started hearing people talking about it and how it related to energy work and whatnot. I looked it up. What's the difference?
What is the difference?
Well,
What does Webster have to say about it?
the vibration is the movement, and frequency is the measurement of that
Ah,
movement.
measurement of the movement.
Basically, I mean, that's the easiest way to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you understand that those two components, the vibration and frequency, and as spiritual seekers, that's what we're trying to do, is like raise our frequency. Well, the way to do that is to vibrate higher, right? That's the word, vibration.
Right.
So what do? What do you personally do to try to raise the vibration?
Oh, I raise my vibration on a regular, on a nanosecond to nanosecond basis just by focusing on what feels good. Because what feels good is a higher vibration. So that's the outcome. And I love how Abraham says, well, we hear you humans. You say, well, okay, if you're saying I have to feel good in order to get the outcome I want, then I'll play your stupid game. And I just laugh every time because we are so resistant to the idea of feeling good. Well,
Yeah.
I just took to that concept like a duck to water. I stopped hanging out with people that drove me crazy. I mean, I wasn't perfect at it by a long shot because it was a lot of old momentum to overcome, but I have practiced for 10 years really religiously, I'll say, spiritually. I have practiced just controlling my focus and focusing only on that which feels good, what I call blisscipline. And no matter what it is, no matter how important it is, no matter how much money is involved, no matter how much the peanut gallery is demanding I do something, no matter how much the IRS is involved or anything, I do what feels good. I focus on what feels good, and that keeps my vibration, relatively speaking, not perfect, but relatively high, most of the time. And that's how I do it. That's what I teach. That's the kind of the basis of my whole thing is do whatever it takes to feel good, and then everything else falls into line.
Yeah.
And the
That's
real trick is learning to discern what it is that actually feels good. You
Yes,
know,
that is the real trick. And I would
it
say,
really
even
is.
in on this part of the conversation, I would say I was a slow growth into that.
Oh
Like
yeah, me
you
too.
kind of comprehended a little bit, but then you have to be able to put it into practice to understand, to see kind of a result of what you're doing, and how does that make me feel. And then eventually you just get to a point where you're like, you're practiced enough at that you kind of like really think you've got it, until something hits
Yeah.
you again. It's like, oh, I
Any old
have,
relationship can come along and just kick it right in the butt.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
fine when I'm alone. It's funny.
Yeah, it's always
But
easier when you're by yourself.
that momentum gets started so slowly, it can be hard to trust. If you don't have any training in it or any support or encouragement in it, and you're just trying to do it in a vacuum, it can be really tough to get the momentum going. Because you do it once or twice and then you don't see any outcome. And so you go, see, I told you this didn't work.
Right,
So you
right.
really have got to get the momentum going before you start to see results. It really takes some faith, some trust, some support of some sort.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
practice,
and practice. Yeah.
practice at it,
Yeah.
because you do get better and better and better at it. And as
Yeah.
you're getting better, your vibration is actually changing. And
Yes.
and at some point you just recognize that you are not the same person that you used to be.
Yeah.
and you can understand that it's because I've changed my vibration, because I'm seeking out those things that bring me more joy. And
Right.
joy being a higher vibration, a higher frequency is what we're shooting for. We're aiming for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Beautiful. Well said.